My dad died 8 months ago. I just found a letter he hid for 35 years. I can't decide if I should tell my sister or take it to my grave. I asked my perfect boyfriend for permission to cheat. I didn't expect him to say 4 words that ended everything. Before anyone comes at me, I already know I'm the villain here. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just need to write this down because I can't stop replaying it in my head. I'm 24, and my boyfriend Cole is 38. We've been together for 3 years, and I know people judge age gaps, but Cole has been the best relationship I've ever had. We met when I was a hostess at a restaurant, and he came in for a business dinner. He asked for my number on his way out, and I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date lasted 6 hours. He was smart, funny, mature in a way guys my age never were. He didn't play games. Within 4 months, I had moved into his apartment. The first 2 years were perfect. He cooked for me, planned trips, remembered every small thing I mentioned. My friends were jealous. My mom adored him. I thought I had found the person I was going to marry. Then his company got acquired and everything changed. Cole got promoted and suddenly he was working constantly. He would leave before I woke up and come home after I was in bed. Weekends disappeared. Date nights got canceled. I told him I was lonely. He apologized and tried to make more time, but it wasn't enough. He was exhausted and I felt guilty asking for more. That's when I reconnected with Travis. We dated briefly in college and ended on good terms. He found me on Instagram and we started messaging. At first it was catching up, but then it became more frequent. He texted me good morning. He asked about my day. He gave me the attention I was craving. One night, Cole was stuck at the office and Travis asked if I wanted to get drinks. I said yes. When he walked me to my car, he kissed me. I kissed him back. We ended up in his back seat and things happened. Not full sex, but enough. I drove home feeling sick, but also feeling seen for the first time in months. I knew I had to tell Cole something. So the next evening, I sat him down and told him I had been feeling neglected. I told him I wanted to propose an open relationship so I could get my needs met while he focused on his career. He listened quietly. He asked clarifying questions. He seemed so calm that I thought maybe this could work. Then I told him the last part. I said this would only be open on my side. I explained that I didn't want him sleeping with other women because that would hurt me, but since he was never home anyway, it shouldn't matter. I told him I already had someone in mind and that nothing serious had happened yet. I lied about the nothing happened yet part. I thought it would make everything sound more reasonable. Cole sat there for a long time. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes did. When he finally spoke, he said 4 words. I need you out. I started crying immediately. I tried to take it back, told him I didn't mean it, that I was confused and lonely. He stood up and walked to the bedroom. I followed him, begging. He pulled a suitcase out of the closet and set it on the bed. He told me I had until morning to pack. He said he wasn't angry, just done. He said I had already made my choice before I came to him and we both knew it. He slept in the guest room. I packed through tears. In the morning, he was gone. I left my key on the counter and went to my sister's place. That was 2 weeks ago. I called him every day the first week. He never responded. Then yesterday, my sister came home with a strange look on her face. She asked if I knew a woman named Priya. I said no. She handed me her phone. It was an Instagram post from Cole's co-worker, a group photo from a company dinner. Cole was in the back with his arm around a woman I had never seen. She was gorgeous. Dark hair, perfect smile, looking at him like he was the only person in the room. The caption said, "Director's dinner with some very special +1s." I zoomed in on his face. He was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in over a year. My sister said her friend at Cole's company told her he's been bringing this woman around for the past week, that everyone assumed they'd been together for a while based on how comfortable they seemed. 1 week. I've been gone 2 weeks and he's already with someone else. Either he moved on impossibly fast, or she was already in the picture before I even had that conversation. I don't know which is worse. I texted him last night asking if we could talk. He responded this morning. He said there's nothing to discuss, but if I need closure, he can meet me Thursday. I said yes. I need to see his face when I ask him who she is and how long she's been around. Thursday is in 2 days. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday glued to my phone, refreshing Cole's Instagram every few minutes even though I knew it was pointless. He never posted much anyway, but I kept checking, hoping for something that would tell me what he was thinking. I rehearsed conversations in my head while lying in my sister's guest bed, running through every possible way our Thursday meeting could go. In most of my imagined scenarios, Cole admitted Priya was just a rebound, someone to distract himself with after I hurt him. He would say he still loved me, that we could work through this if I promised to change. I knew these fantasies were ridiculous, but I couldn't stop myself from playing them on repeat. Part of me understood I was being delusional, but the rest of me needed to believe there was still a chance. Tuesday night I couldn't sleep, so I moved to the couch around midnight and started scrolling through Cole's old posts. My sister found me there at 2 in the morning, still staring at a photo from our trip to Portland last year. She sat down next to me without saying anything at first, just watching me zoom in on Cole's face in the picture like I could find answers there. Finally, she asked if I had actually thought about what I would do if Cole confirmed he had moved on for good. The question stopped me cold because I realized I hadn't let myself consider that outcome as real. Every plan I had made assumed Cole would at least be open to talking about us, that seeing me in person would remind him of what we had. My sister's face was gentle but serious as she waited for my answer. I didn't have one. She took the phone from my hands and set it on the coffee table, then told me I needed to prepare myself for the possibility that Thursday wouldn't go the way I hoped. I started to argue, but she cut me off, saying she loved me, but I needed to be realistic about what I had done and what it meant. She went back to bed and I sat there in the dark, feeling sick. Thursday morning I woke up early even though I barely slept. I stood in front of my sister's closet for almost an hour, pulling out different outfits and holding them up to myself in the mirror. Nothing looked right. I wanted to look like I was doing fine, like the breakup hadn't destroyed me, but I also wanted Cole to see what he was giving up. I changed 4 times, trying on jeans and a nice top, then a dress that felt too formal, then leggings and a sweater that made me look like I had given up. Finally, I settled on the blue sweater Cole always said brought out my eyes, paired with jeans that fit well. As soon as I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt pathetic for caring what he thought about my outfit. He was probably bringing Priya around to company dinners, and I was standing here trying to manipulate him with a sweater. I almost changed again, but ran out of time. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early because I couldn't stand waiting at my sister's apartment anymore. The place was busy with the morning crowd, but I found a corner table where I could see the front door. My hands shook as I ordered a latte from the barista, some drink I didn't even want but felt like I needed to buy something to justify taking up space. I sat down and wrapped my fingers around the cup to stop them from trembling. My planned questions about Priya kept running through my head. I would ask him directly who she was and how long they had been together. I would stay calm and mature, not accusatory. I would make him see that I deserved honesty about whether she existed before our conversation 2 weeks ago. The coffee burned my tongue when I tried to drink it, but I barely noticed. Cole walked in at exactly 11 o'clock, looking like he had slept perfectly the night before. His face was relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. He was wearing the gray jacket I bought him for his birthday last year, and the sight of it made my stomach hurt. He went to the counter and ordered his usual black coffee without looking around for me first, like he wasn't in any hurry. When he finally walked over to my table and sat down across from me, his expression was completely neutral. Not angry, not sad, just blank. He set his coffee on the table and waited for me to speak first. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. All my rehearsed questions disappeared, and I just sat there staring at him like an idiot. I forced myself to ask who Priya was and how long they had been together, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Cole took a slow sip of his coffee before answering, like he was thinking about whether I even deserved an explanation. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and matter-of-fact. He said Priya was a director at a partner company his firm had been working with for 8 months. 8 months. The number hit me hard because that meant she was around for most of the time I was feeling neglected and complaining to Travis. Cole kept talking, explaining that they worked together on the acquisition project and became friends through all the late nights and weekend meetings. He said she understood the pressure he was under in ways I never seemed to. My prepared accusations about him cheating died in my throat because the timeline he was describing started way before Travis kissed me in that parking lot. I had been so ready to confront him about emotional infidelity, to make him admit he had someone else while we were together. But 8 months meant Priya was there through everything, watching Cole stress about work while I complained he wasn't paying enough attention to me. Cole's eyes stayed steady on mine as he continued. He said he never touched Priya while we were together, never crossed that line physically, but he wouldn't apologize for developing feelings for someone who actually saw him as a partner instead of just a provider. The words landed like a slap. I realized that was exactly how I had been treating him, like someone whose job was to take care of me and make me happy, not like an actual person with his own struggles. I tried to defend myself by bringing up how lonely I was and how he was never home, but Cole cut me off before I could finish. His voice stayed gentle but firm as he said he had been building a future for us while I was building an exit strategy. He said we both knew which one of us gave up first. I wanted to argue that it wasn't that simple, that he had checked out emotionally long before I did anything with Travis. But sitting across from him now, seeing how calm and sure he was, I couldn't make myself believe my own excuses anymore. Cole set his coffee down and looked at me directly. He said the open relationship thing wasn't actually what ended everything between us. It was that I had already cheated and was asking for permission after the fact. His voice didn't change when he said it. No anger or hurt, just stating a fact. Then he told me he knew I was lying about nothing serious happening yet the moment those words came out of my mouth. I felt my face go hot as he kept talking. He said I have this tell when I lie where I touch my neck, and he noticed me doing it that night. He knew immediately that I had already been with Travis or someone else and was trying to get retroactive approval to make myself feel better about it. I couldn't even deny it because he was completely right. Cole admitted he'd been questioning everything for months before that conversation. He said he noticed how I only seemed happy when he was doing something for me, taking me somewhere, buying me something, fixing a problem I had. He said the age gap that felt exciting at first had turned into a burden of constantly managing my expectations, like I was someone he had to take care of instead of a partner. His voice stayed calm, but I could hear the weight in it, like he'd been carrying this around for a long time. I asked why he didn't say anything sooner if he was so unhappy, my voice coming out sharper than I meant it to. Cole's expression changed for the first time since we sat down, something flickering across his face that looked almost sad. He said he tried multiple times to talk about us growing apart, about how we never really connected anymore beyond surface stuff. He said every time he brought it up, I would turn it into complaints about his work schedule instead of actually listening to what he was trying to say. The words hit me hard because I couldn't remember any of those conversations, but the look on his face told me they definitely happened. He pulled out his phone and scrolled for a minute before turning it toward me. The screen showed text messages from 4 months ago, his name at the top with a blue bubble saying they should probably talk about seeing a couples counselor. My response was 3 laughing emojis and a message saying he was being dramatic, that we were fine and he just needed to relax. I stared at those words, my own words, and couldn't remember writing them at all. But there they were, proof that I had dismissed him when he was trying to save us. Cole put his phone back in his pocket and told me he had already started the process of emotionally letting go before my proposition. He said that's why he could end things so cleanly, why those 4 words came out so easily. They weren't a reaction to what I said about wanting an open relationship. They were the conclusion he had already reached, and I just gave him the final push he needed. I felt tears starting and tried to blink them back, but couldn't stop them from spilling over. I asked if there was any chance for us to try again, hating how my voice cracked but unable to stop myself from asking. I already knew the answer before he opened his mouth. Cole's face softened slightly, but his voice stayed firm when he said no. That ship had sailed and he was genuinely happy now. He said he didn't want to go back to feeling like he was failing someone every day, just by being himself. He mentioned that Priya knows everything about what happened between us because he values honesty in relationships. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and obvious. I didn't value honesty. I had lied about Travis, lied about nothing happening yet, probably lied to myself about 100 other things. I couldn't even argue with him because he was completely right. Cole stood up and pushed his chair back, getting ready to leave. He told me he hoped I would figure out what I actually wanted instead of just reacting to feeling neglected. He said I was young and had time to grow, but that growth needed to happen away from him. His words were kind but final, like he was closing a door gently but making sure it locked behind him. He picked up his coffee cup and walked toward the trash can near the exit. I watched him throw it away and push through the door without looking back. The bell above the door chimed and then he was gone. I sat there alone at the table staring at my cold latte. An hour passed and I didn't move, just kept replaying the conversation in my head. Every question I asked got answered honestly, while I had built our entire relationship on manipulating his generosity. He was kinder to me than I deserved, explaining everything calmly when he could have just told me to leave him alone. I thought about how I touched my neck when I lied, how he noticed that detail and knew immediately I was lying about Travis. I thought about the texts I didn't remember sending, dismissing his concerns with laughing emojis like his feelings were a joke. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister asking if I needed a ride. I texted back yes because I was too upset to drive, my hands shaking too much to trust myself behind the wheel. She showed up 20 minutes later and found me still sitting at the same table. She didn't ask questions, just helped me stand up and walked me to her car. Once we were driving, I told her everything Cole said. She listened quietly, her eyes on the road, not interrupting or offering opinions. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment before asking if I was finally ready to be honest with myself about who I had been. The question made my chest tight because I knew what she meant. Not who I wanted to be or who I thought I was, but who I actually was based on my actions. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure I was ready for that honesty yet. I couldn't sleep that night. My sister had gone to bed hours ago, but I was still on the couch with my phone, scrolling back to the beginning of my messages with Travis. The first text was from 5 months ago, right after he found me on Instagram. Just a casual hey, asking how I'd been. I remembered feeling excited to hear from him, like it was innocent nostalgia for college days. But as I kept reading, I saw how quickly I'd turned every conversation toward my problems with Cole. Travis would ask about my job, and I'd respond with 3 sentences about work, followed by a paragraph about how Cole was never home. He'd mention a movie he saw, and I'd say I wished I had someone to go to movies with since my boyfriend was always at the office. Every single message from me contained some complaint about Cole, some mention of feeling lonely or neglected. I was building a case against Cole to justify what I wanted to do with Travis. The emotional affair didn't start when we kissed in his car. It started the moment I began using Travis as my outlet for everything I wasn't saying to Cole. I kept scrolling and found the night we hooked up. My texts afterward were full of guilt but also excitement, asking when we could see each other again. Travis had responded with casual enthusiasm, nothing deep or meaningful, just a guy who was available and willing, exactly like I had been. I opened a new message to him and typed out a question, asking if we could talk because I needed to know if what we had was real or just mutual selfishness. I stared at the words for a long time before hitting send. Part of me didn't want to know the answer. I set my phone down and tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying the texts, seeing clearly how I'd manipulated the situation from the start. When I woke up the next morning, there was no response from Travis. 6 hours passed before my phone finally buzzed with his reply. He said he'd actually been seeing someone for the past week and thought I knew we were just having fun. The message was so casual it took me a moment to process what he was saying. He'd moved on within days of our last conversation and apparently assumed I understood we were never serious. I read it 3 times, then started laughing. It was a bitter, ugly sound that made my sister poke her head out of her bedroom to check if I was okay. I showed her the message and she just shook her head. Of course, Travis was never going to be my salvation from loneliness or my escape from a failing relationship. I'd built him up in my head as this perfect alternative to Cole, when really he was just a guy who was available and said the right things at the right time. He wasn't special or different. He was just there, and I used that. My phone buzzed again, and I expected another message from Travis, but it was from someone named Natalia. The text said she was my sister's friend and worked at Cole's company, asking if I wanted the full story about Cole and Priya, since she'd heard I was looking for information. My finger hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to say no, to just let it go and stop torturing myself with details. But I needed to understand what I actually lost when Cole said those 4 words. I texted back yes. Natalia called instead of texting, and her voice was kind but direct. She told me Cole had talked about relationship problems with close work friends months ago, back when his company was going through the acquisition. Everyone could see he was struggling with something personal on top of the work stress. When Priya joined the project as a consultant from the partner company, people noticed how much lighter Cole seemed around her. They'd work late together, and he'd actually smile and joke instead of looking exhausted and tense. Natalia said it was obvious to everyone that Cole and Priya had chemistry, but Cole never acted on it while we were together. She told me something that made my stomach hurt. Priya had apparently told Cole she had feelings for him 6 weeks before I ever sat him down with my open relationship proposition. But Cole had said he was in a relationship and needed to figure that out first before anything could happen. Priya respected that completely and kept things professional while Cole decided what to do about us. 6 weeks. He'd known someone else wanted him and could make him happy, but he stayed with me and tried to work things out anyway. Natalia kept talking, saying that after Cole ended things with me, he waited 2 full weeks before asking Priya out properly. He told his coworkers he needed to be completely sure he was making decisions for the right reasons and not just rebounding. Even his new relationship had more integrity than my entire approach to our 3 years together. I thanked Natalia and hung up, then sat there staring at the wall. Cole had been trying to do the right thing, fighting to figure out his relationship with me while I was in Travis's back seat. The comparison crushed me. I wasn't just the villain in our story. I was the only villain. Cole had someone interested in him and chose to stay loyal and work on us. I had someone interested in me and chose to cheat and then ask permission after the fact. The doorbell rang and I heard my sister answer it. Carly's voice came from the hallway asking if I was home. My best friend walked into the living room and took one look at my face before sitting down next to me. I told her everything. Not the cleaned-up version I'd been telling people, but the real story. How I'd been emotionally cheating on Cole for months with Travis. How I'd hooked up with Travis and then tried to make Cole agree to let me keep doing it. How Cole had someone who wanted him, but stayed faithful while trying to fix things with me. How Priya waited patiently while Cole figured out his life, and how he waited 2 weeks after ending things with me before starting something with her. I told Carly about the texts I'd read last night, seeing how I'd been feeding Travis complaints about Cole to justify what I wanted. Carly listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said she'd noticed something over the past year. I only talked about Cole in terms of what he did for me, never who he was as a person. She said every conversation we had about my relationship was focused on my feelings, my needs, my loneliness. She couldn't remember the last time I'd mentioned anything about Cole's actual life. Her words hit hard because she was right. I sat there trying to think of the last real conversation I'd had with Cole about his life. When was the last time I asked about his stress from the acquisition? His goals for his career? His feelings about all the changes at work? I couldn't remember a single conversation in the past year where I'd focused on him instead of my own needs. Carly sat with me on that couch for another hour, not saying much, just being there while I processed everything. She finally stood up and said she needed to get home, but wanted me to really think about what she'd said. I nodded and walked her to the door. After she left, I went back to the living room and stared at the wall for a while. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom asking how I was doing. I'd been giving her vague updates since the breakup, nothing specific about what actually happened. She knew Cole and I had ended things, but I'd blamed it on the usual stuff. Growing apart, different priorities, nothing that made me look like the bad guy. But sitting there after everything Carly had said, I couldn't keep lying to my mom. I called her instead of texting back. She answered on the second ring and asked what was wrong because I never called in the middle of the day. I told her I needed to explain what really happened with Cole, the actual truth, not the cleaned up version I'd been feeding everyone. There was a pause before she said, "Okay." She was listening. I started from the beginning, how Cole had been working constantly, and I felt neglected. How I'd reconnected with Travis and started an emotional affair that turned physical. How I'd asked Cole for a one-sided open relationship after already cheating. How he'd ended things immediately, and how I'd discovered he had someone new within a week. I told her about learning that Cole had stayed faithful while someone else wanted him, that he'd tried to work on us while I was in Travis's car. My mom was quiet through all of it. When I finished, the silence stretched out so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke and said she was disappointed in how I'd handled things, but she loved me anyway. Her voice was sad in a way that made my chest hurt. She said she'd always liked Cole and thought he was good for me, but she'd worried about the age gap from the start. I asked what she meant, and she explained that she'd wondered if I was looking for someone to take care of me instead of building an actual partnership. She said she'd hoped her instincts were wrong, but apparently they were right. I tried to defend myself, but the words died before I could say them because she wasn't wrong. My mom told me she thought I needed to talk to someone professional about this, that I clearly had things to work through that were bigger than just one relationship. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and I sat there feeling like I'd disappointed everyone who mattered. The next morning, I looked up therapists in my area. I found one named Mika Bailey who had availability that week and booked an appointment before I could talk myself out of it. Her office was in a building downtown, and when I walked in for the first session, she greeted me with a calm smile and led me to a small room with 2 chairs. I sat down and immediately started trying to explain why I was there in a way that made me sound less terrible. I talked about Cole's work schedule and my loneliness and how young I was when we got together. Mika listened patiently and then gently pointed out that I was spending a lot of time explaining circumstances, but not taking responsibility for choices. The observation stung, but I couldn't argue with it. She asked me to describe what I brought to my relationship with Cole beyond just being there, and I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I sat there trying to think of something meaningful I'd contributed, and came up blank. I'd been young and fun in the beginning, but that wasn't really bringing something to a partnership. Cole had handled the bills, the cooking, the planning, all the actual work of maintaining our life together. I'd just coasted along enjoying the benefits. Mika didn't push when I couldn't answer, just made a note and moved on to other questions. By the end of the session, I felt raw and exposed, but also like maybe this was necessary. I scheduled my next appointment for the following week. When I came back for the second session, Mika asked me to think about the open relationship proposition I'd made to Cole. She wanted me to walk through the actual logic of what I'd asked for. I explained how I'd wanted to see other people while keeping Cole from doing the same, and hearing myself say it out loud made it sound even worse than it had in my head. Mika pointed out that I'd designed the whole thing specifically to punish Cole for not meeting my needs while protecting myself from any consequences. The calculation behind it made me feel sick. I'd convinced myself I was just trying to get my needs met, but really I'd been trying to have everything my way without considering his feelings at all. I left that session feeling worse than the first one, but Mika said discomfort meant I was actually looking at things honestly. That weekend I was scrolling through social media and saw a post from someone who knew both Cole and me. It was from a gallery opening downtown, and there in the background was Cole with his arm around Priya. They were looking at a painting together, and something about the way they stood next to each other looked different from any photo I had with Cole. They looked like equals, like 2 people who were actually on the same level, instead of one person taking care of the other. I zoomed in on their faces and they both looked genuinely happy in a way that had nothing to do with me. I closed the app and put my phone face down on the table. My phone buzzed an hour later with a text from Travis asking if I wanted to come over and hook up. I stared at the message and felt absolutely nothing. No excitement, no temptation, not even anger. Whatever I'd thought I wanted from him had just been a way to avoid facing how inadequate I felt in a real relationship. I typed back a simple no and then blocked his number without waiting for a response. When I told Mika about it at our next session, she said blocking Travis was actual progress, even though it felt like just basic decency to me. She pointed out that keeping him as an option would have been exactly the kind of behavior that got me into this mess in the first place. A few days after my last therapy session, my sister knocked on my bedroom door and asked if we could talk. I followed her to the kitchen where she had coffee already poured for both of us. She sat down across from me and said she loved having me there, but this was only supposed to be temporary. I needed to start looking for my own place. The words felt like a punch, even though I knew she was right. I'd been treating her apartment like a safe space where I could hide from rebuilding my actual life. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, told me this wasn't about kicking me out, but about me learning to stand on my own. I nodded and felt tears starting but pushed them back. That weekend I started searching for apartments online, and the reality of my situation hit me fast. Everything I could actually afford was depressing in ways that made my chest tight. Studio apartments with carpet stains and tiny windows that looked out at brick walls. 1-bedrooms in buildings where the hallways smelled like old food and cigarette smoke. I'd gotten so used to Cole's place with the big windows and nice appliances that I'd forgotten what my actual price range looked like. The apartment we'd shared together cost more than twice what I could afford on my own. I'd been living a life Cole paid for while contributing basically nothing, and now I was seeing exactly where I actually belonged. The apartments in my budget were the kind of places I'd driven past and felt grateful I didn't live in, and now they were my only options. I called Carly and asked if she'd come look at places with me because I couldn't face it alone. She met me the next afternoon and we drove to 3 different buildings. The first one had a broken elevator and stairs that made my legs burn by the 3rd floor. The second one had a landlord who kept staring at my chest while explaining the lease terms. The third one was actually clean, but so small I couldn't figure out where I'd put a couch. Carly walked through each place with me and didn't say anything negative until we were back in her car. Then she turned to me and said, maybe having my own space that I paid for myself was exactly what I needed. She pointed out that I'd never really lived independently before. I'd gone from my parents' house to a college dorm to Cole's apartment without ever having to be completely responsible for myself. The observation stung because it was true. I'd jumped into living with Cole after 4 months because it was easier and nicer than figuring out my own housing situation. I'd taken the path that required the least effort from me. We looked at 2 more places the following week, and I finally found one that felt manageable. A small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building that wasn't falling apart. The kitchen was tiny and the bathroom had old tiles, but the bedroom had decent light and the whole place was clean. The rent was exactly at the top of what I could afford, which meant I'd have to actually budget for the first time in 3 years. I filled out the application sitting in Carly's car and felt my hand shaking as I signed my name. The landlord called 2 days later and said I was approved. I'd need first month, last month, and security deposit by the end of the week. I looked at my bank account and realized I'd have almost nothing left after paying all that. No safety net, no cushion, just me trying to make it work on my server wages and tips. I transferred the money and felt simultaneously proud and scared in a way that made my stomach hurt. Moving day came 3 weeks later, and my sister and Carly showed up with Carly's boyfriend's truck. We loaded up the furniture I'd bought from a thrift store and the kitchen stuff my sister had given me from her extras. Everything was mismatched and worn, but it was mine in a way Cole's expensive furniture had never been. We carried boxes up the stairs, and my sister kept making jokes to keep the mood light. By the afternoon, the apartment was set up, and it looked sparse and kind of sad, but it was my space that I was paying for with my own money. After they left, I sat on my second-hand couch and looked around at my new life. The walls were bare and the furniture didn't match, and I could hear my neighbor's television through the wall. This was where I actually was in life, not in some nice apartment with a successful older boyfriend taking care of everything. I went to the grocery store that evening to stock my empty fridge and ran into Arlo from Cole's company in the produce section. He looked surprised to see me, and we had an awkward moment where we both pretended we might not recognize each other. Then he smiled and said hi and asked how I was doing. I gave him some vague answer about being fine and starting fresh. He nodded, and there was a pause before he mentioned that Cole seemed really happy lately. There was no judgment in his voice, just a simple statement of fact, but it stung anyway. I asked if he'd met Priya, and Arlo said yes, that she was great and they seemed really good together. He said it kindly, but I felt my face get hot. We talked for another minute about nothing important, and then he said it was good to see me and walked away. I stood there holding a bag of apples and feeling like everyone in Cole's life had moved on except me. At my next therapy session, Mika asked about my new apartment, and I described it and the whole process of finding it. She said she was proud of me for taking that step toward independence. Then she shifted the conversation and asked about my pattern of seeking validation from men instead of building my own sense of worth. I tried to deflect, but she kept pushing, asking what I actually wanted to do with my life beyond being someone's girlfriend. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't have one. I'd spent so much energy on my relationship status that I'd never developed real goals for myself. Mika let the silence sit there while I tried to think of something meaningful to say about my future. Finally, I admitted I didn't know what I wanted because I'd been so focused on having a boyfriend that I never thought about what I wanted to build for myself. She asked what I was good at and what interested me, and I struggled to answer that too. At 24, I should have some kind of direction, but I'd been coasting on potential instead of actually building anything real. The conversation left me feeling raw and exposed in a way that made me want to skip my next session. That week at work, my manager pulled me aside and asked if we could talk in the office. My stomach dropped because I knew my performance had been terrible for months. I'd been showing up late, forgetting orders, giving customers attitude when I was having bad days. She sat me down and asked directly if I was still committed to being there or if I needed to find something else. Her tone wasn't mean, but it was serious in a way that scared me. I apologized and said I'd been going through personal stuff, but that wasn't an excuse. She said she understood everyone had problems, but I needed to decide if I could actually do my job or not. The restaurant couldn't keep covering for me when I wasn't pulling my weight. I promised I'd do better, and she said she hoped, so because she didn't want to have this conversation again. After that, I actually started trying at work for the first time in months. I showed up early, paid attention to my tables, stopped treating the job like something beneath me. I focused on doing the work well instead of just getting through shifts. My tips got better because I was actually being pleasant to customers. My coworkers stopped giving me annoyed looks when I came in. After 2 weeks, my manager noticed the change and pulled me aside again. This time, she said she was glad to see the improvement and that if I kept it up, there might be opportunities for advancement. Maybe training new servers or eventually moving to a supervisor role. The idea of actually having a career path at the restaurant had never occurred to me before because I'd always seen the job as temporary, something I did while waiting for real life to start. But real life was happening now, and I needed to take it seriously. I spent the next few weeks actually focusing on my job and my life instead of obsessing over Cole. My manager started giving me more responsibility, and I took it seriously. I showed up early, stayed late when needed, and stopped treating customers like they were interrupting my day. My coworkers noticed the change and started being friendlier. One of them invited me to happy hour, and I went instead of making an excuse. It felt good to have something that was mine, separate from any relationship drama. Natalia texted me one evening while I was making dinner in my tiny kitchen. She said she'd seen Cole and Priya at a company event that afternoon, and they announced they were moving in together. I sat down on my couch and stared at the message for a long time. The news hurt, but not in the sharp way I expected. Mostly I just felt sad about how completely I was replaced. They were doing all the things Cole and I used to do, moving through the same relationship steps, and I was just this footnote in his past that he'd already moved beyond. I texted Natalia back thanking her for telling me, then put my phone away and finished making my pasta. At my next therapy session, I told Mika about the moving in together news. She asked how it made me feel, and I struggled to explain the weird mix of sadness and acceptance. She said that feeling replaced was my ego talking, that Cole wasn't replacing me so much as moving forward with someone more compatible. I wanted to argue, but she kept going. She pointed out that I was seeing his happiness as commentary on my worth. Like him being happy with someone else meant I was defective somehow. But really it just meant we weren't right for each other and he found someone who was. She asked if I could be happy for him, even though it hurt, and I said I didn't know yet. But I was trying. 3 months after the breakup, I picked up a shift at the restaurant where Cole and I first met. I usually avoided working there because of the memories, but I needed the money. I was taking an order at a table near the window when I saw them walk in. Cole and Priya. They didn't notice me, and I watched them for a moment while my customer talked about allergies, the easy conversation between them, the genuine laugh, the way they leaned toward each other like they were the only people in the room. It was the same way Cole and I used to be in the beginning, except they looked more equal somehow, more like actual partners instead of him taking care of me. I finished taking the order and walked quickly to the back. My coworker asked if I was okay, and I said I needed some air. I left through the side door before they could see me and sat in my car for a few minutes. Instead of spiraling like I would have before, I called Mika even though it wasn't our session day. She picked up and I told her what happened. She listened while I talked through my feelings, how seeing them together made me realize how much I'd taken from Cole without giving anything back. She said witnessing their happiness without making it about me was significant growth, even though it didn't feel like much. I thanked her and went back inside to finish my shift. That weekend, my sister and I were doing laundry at her apartment, and she mentioned she was proud of how I was handling everything. She said she could see me actually working on myself instead of just jumping to the next relationship like I usually did. The compliment caught me off guard, and I felt tears start. She hugged me and said she knew it was hard, but I was doing the work and it showed. I asked if she thought I'd ever be able to have a healthy relationship, and she said yes, but only after I figured out who I was without someone else defining me. 2 weeks later, my manager called me into the office and I thought I was in trouble again. Instead, she told me I was getting a small promotion to shift supervisor. The pay increase wasn't huge, but it was something. I called Carly to celebrate and we went out for drinks. She pointed out this was the first accomplishment I'd had in years that wasn't connected to a boyfriend. She was right, and it felt good to have something that was just mine, something I'd earned through my own work, instead of being given by someone who loved me. At my next therapy session, Mika asked if I thought I was ready to start dating again. I opened my mouth to say yes automatically, then stopped. I realized I wasn't ready. For the first time in my adult life, I was okay being alone, because I was learning who I was without someone else defining me. I told Mika that, and she smiled. She said that was exactly the kind of awareness I needed to develop before getting into another relationship. We talked about my pattern of using boyfriends to avoid dealing with my own issues, and how much work I still had to do. 4 months after our Thursday meeting, I ran into Cole at a coffee shop downtown. I was picking up my order when I heard his voice behind me. My stomach dropped, but I turned around and said hi. He looked good, relaxed in a way I rarely saw when we were together. We had a brief, polite conversation about nothing important. I mentioned my promotion and new apartment, and he seemed genuinely happy for me. Not fake happy or sarcastic, actually pleased that I was doing well. It made me feel worse somehow, knowing he could be kind even after everything. Cole told me he was glad I was doing well and he meant it. No bitterness or anger in his voice, just honest relief that I was okay. I thanked him for being kind during our breakup, even though I didn't deserve it. He just nodded and said he hoped I figured things out. Then he said goodbye and walked toward the door with his coffee. I watched him leave and felt something shift inside me. Some endings don't come with closure or redemption. Sometimes you just have to live with having been the person who messed up and work on being better going forward. There's no magic moment where everything makes sense or you get forgiven. You just keep trying to be less selfish and hope that eventually you become someone capable of actually loving another person instead of just using them. 6 months after the breakup, I'm settled into my apartment and doing well at work. My manager gave me more responsibility, and I'm handling it without falling apart. I pay my own bills now, and the pride I feel is different from anything Cole ever gave me. Therapy with Mika happens every Tuesday, and we're working through my issues with validation and independence. Progress is slow but real. I don't check Cole's social media anymore, and that feels like an actual achievement, instead of something I'm white-knuckling through. My apartment still doesn't have much furniture, but it's mine, and I earned it myself. The walls are bare except for one photo my sister took of me at my promotion celebration. I look tired in it, but also present in a way I wasn't before. Some mornings I wake up and forget to feel bad about myself for a full hour. My sister comes over for dinner one night and mentions how different I seem. She says I'm more grounded now, less performative, actually present in conversations instead of waiting for my turn to talk about myself. The observation catches me off guard because I hadn't noticed the change until she pointed it out. Carly says the same thing when we meet for coffee that weekend. She tells me I used to make everything about me even when I was pretending to listen. Now I actually ask follow-up questions and remember details from previous conversations. I'm starting to recognize that person too when I look in the mirror. The woman staring back isn't someone I'm proud of yet, but she's someone I'm learning to live with. Natalia texts me out of nowhere on a Thursday afternoon. She says she thought I should hear it from her instead of seeing it online. Cole and Priya got engaged. The message sits on my screen for a long time before I respond. There's a pang of sadness that hits my chest, but mostly I feel grateful he found someone who could be what he needed. I hope someday I can be that for someone too, after I figure out how to be it for myself first. I text Natalia back thanking her for telling me, and she sends a heart emoji. That night I sit on my couch with takeout and think about Cole's face at that coffee shop 4 months ago. He looked genuinely happy for me when I mentioned my promotion. No bitterness or anger, just honest relief that I was okay. I'm not fixed and I haven't learned some neat lesson that makes everything okay. I'm just a 24-year-old woman who destroyed something good and is trying to build a life anyway. One small decision at a time, knowing that growth is messy and I might mess up again, but at least now I'm trying. Mika says that's enough for now. My sister says I'm doing better than I think. Carly reminds me that recognizing my patterns is half the battle. I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it into someone else's arms. Some days are harder than others, and I still catch myself wanting to text Travis or scroll through dating apps looking for validation, but I don't. I sit with the feeling until it passes, and then I make dinner or call my sister or go to work. The mundane tasks of living alone are teaching me more about myself than any relationship ever did.